The knock came at 5:41 in the morning. Soft, polite, 3 taps, evenly spaced. I remember staring at the clock behind the front desk, watching the seconds tick forward, my brain struggling to reconcile the sound with the rule I'd read less than 6 hours earlier: never knock on a guest's door after checkout. At the time, I didn't understand why that rule existed. I do now. I took the night shift at the motel because it was temporary. 3 weeks, cash pay, no questions asked. The building sat just off a stretch of highway that barely showed up on maps anymore, a place truckers stopped at when they were too tired to keep going and too far from anything real to turn back. The motel didn't advertise. No website, no online bookings. Just a flickering vacancy sign that turned on at midnight and shut itself off at sunrise. The manager, Ray, was waiting when I arrived my first night. He was older than I expected, with the look of someone who hadn't slept properly in years. He slid a key across the counter, gestured to the hallway behind him, and handed me a laminated sheet of paper. "Rules," he said. "Read them. Follow them." Most were normal. Lock the office door after midnight. Don't enter a guest's room unless invited. If the phones ring, let them ring. Then there was the last one. Never knock on a guest's door after checkout. If a guest is still inside after sunrise, notify management. Do not intervene. I laughed a little. Ray didn't. "They're quiet guests," he said after a moment. "That's the only warning you get." By 12:17 a.m., the first car pulled in, then another and another. They didn't arrive like normal travelers, no headlights sweeping the lot, no doors slamming. They just appeared. People stepped out slowly, stiffly, like they'd been walking for a very long time before they stopped. They were polite, always polite. They avoided the lobby mirror, every single one of them. A woman in a gray coat checked in around 2 a.m. When I opened the guest book, her name was already written on the line, neat cursive, not my handwriting. I didn't ask how. By 4:30 a.m., every room was occupied. At 4:59, the hallway lights flickered once. At 5, they shut off completely. And at 5:41, there was a knock from down the hall. Room 6. 3 taps. Waiting. After the first few nights, the motel settled into a routine. That was the worst part. The guests always arrived between midnight and 3, never earlier, never late. They came in small groups or alone, stepping out of cars that looked recently driven but felt cold to the touch when I passed them later on my rounds. Engines silent, hoods cool. No smell of heat or oil in the air. They didn't ask questions. They didn't complain. They handed over IDs I barely glanced at and paid in cash that was always the exact amount. When I gave them their room keys, they took them carefully, like they were fragile. No one ever asked how long they could stay. They didn't turn on lights in their rooms. I only noticed because the hallway remained uniformly dark, doors closing one by one without the usual flicker beneath the frames. Sometimes I heard movement inside, footsteps, a chair sliding, running water, but never laughter, never voices raised above a murmur. I checked the security monitors once, around 2:30 a.m. The camera covering the hallway showed doors opening and closing on a delay, like the footage was struggling to keep up. When a guest entered a room, the picture distorted slightly, lines warping around the doorframe until it shut. Then everything snapped back to normal. The lobby mirror bothered me more. Guests passed through the reflection space without appearing in it. Not disappearing, just skipped, as if the mirror chose not to acknowledge them. When I tested it myself, my reflection looked fine, tired, pale, watching too closely. By 4, the parking lot was full. By 5, it was empty. Every morning, without exception, rooms were left spotless. Beds untouched. Towels neatly folded. The only sign anyone had ever been there were faint, damp footprints leading from the bed to the bathroom and stopping abruptly at the drain. Near dawn on my 6th night, a woman lingered at the desk. She was the one from room 6, the gray coat, the sad eyes. "What happens if I stay?" she asked quietly. The question landed heavier than it should have. I thought of the rule, of Ray's face when he handed me the list. "I don't think you're supposed to," I said. She smiled, not relieved, resigned. "That's what I thought," she said, and turned back toward the hall. At exactly 5 a.m., the hallway lights shut off. I watched her silhouette disappear into the dark. The vacancy sign went dead. And somewhere behind me, the guest book made a sound, like a page turning on its own. Ray arrived just before 6. He always did. I never heard his car pull in. One moment the office was empty and gray with early light. The next he was standing behind the counter, coat still on, eyes already scanning the guest book. He flipped through the pages quickly, then slowed, stopped. His finger rested on a single line. "Which room?" he asked. 6, I said. Ray closed the book without looking at me. "That one stayed too long," he said. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. The hallway felt colder as we walked. Not drafty, compressed, like the air had thickened. Every door was shut, every sign flipped to vacant, except one. Room 6. Occupied. I told myself it was a mistake, a jammed latch, anything that didn't involve the rule. Something moved inside the room. Not footsteps, shifting, like someone adjusting their weight after standing still too long. I raised my hand. Ray caught my wrist before I could knock. His grip was firm, urgent. The first real emotion I'd seen from him all week. "Don't," he said. "If you knock, you're inviting them to finish." I asked what that meant. Ray didn't answer right away. He listened to the door. "They come here incomplete," he said finally. "Tired, worn thin, running from something that already has one hand on them." The door rattled softly. A polite sound. 3 taps from the inside. Ray didn't flinch. "This place buys them time," he continued. "Nothing more. Sunrise is the limit. After that, whatever was following them catches up." The knocking came again, closer this time, as if the door itself were thinner. I leaned in before I realized I was doing it. "Can we help her?" I asked. Ray shook his head. "If you open that door," he said, "you're telling it that it's allowed to stay." The hallway stretched, just slightly, enough that the exit sign felt farther away than it should have been. A voice came through the door. Calm, familiar. "Please," the woman said. "I didn't mean to break the rule." Ray stepped back. "That's why the rule exists," he said. "Not to punish them, to protect everyone else." The door handle turned on its own. The first line of daylight slipped through the lobby windows, and the knocking stopped. The door to room 6 opened without a sound, not swung, relaxed, like it had been holding itself shut and finally let go. Cold spilled into the hallway, but not the kind that came from outside. This was deeper, pressurized. The air grew heavy enough that my ears popped, and every instinct in my body screamed that something had shifted its attention toward us. The room was bigger inside. I don't mean cluttered or distorted by shadow. I mean the walls were farther apart than the building allowed. The The ceiling stretched upward into dimness as if the room had borrowed space from somewhere else. The woman stood just inside. She looked almost the same, almost human. Her gray coat hung strangely as though it were waiting for her to fill it properly. When she moved, her reflection lagged behind her by half a second, catching up in small, jerking motions. She smiled too wide, too carefully. "I didn't want to go back yet," she said. Behind her, something shifted. Not stepping forward, aligning, like a shape adjusting itself to fit through an opening it hadn't used in a long time. Ray didn't look at it. He kept his eyes on her. "You stayed past sunrise," he said. "That means it's allowed to finish following you." She nodded. Relief crossed her face. Actual relief. "I was so tired," she whispered. The hallway trembled. Doors along the corridor creaked open one by one, just enough to reveal darkness inside. I felt the weight of attention press down on me from every direction. Ray stepped away from the door. "This is why we don't knock," he said quietly. "Knocking tells them they're welcome. Staying tells it there's room." The woman reached out, fingers stretching farther than they should have, joints bending wrong as she tried to hold herself together. "I just needed a little more time," she said. Something behind her exhaled. The lights flickered. The exit sign dimmed. Ray turned to me then, really looked at me for the first time since I'd started the job. "One of us has to stay," he said. The room behind the woman expanded again like it was inhaling, and dawn pushed its light fully through the lobby windows. Ray didn't argue. He just set the office keys on the counter and stepped outside as the morning light finished spilling across the lot. By the time I looked through the window, the highway was empty again, stretching on in both directions like it always had, like it always would. The door to room 6 closed behind us. Not slammed, not locked. Satisfied. The hallway returned to its proper length. The pressure eased. Doors along the corridor shut themselves one by one. Whatever had been following her had finished its work and moved on. Ray paused at the threshold. "Rules only work if someone enforces them," he said. "This place doesn't need saving. It needs consistency." Then he left. The guest book was waiting. It lay open on the counter, pages already turned to the next shift. The handwriting was neat, familiar. My name sat at the top of the page. I didn't remember writing it. The mirror behind the desk finally reflected me the way it was supposed to. I looked older, tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. When I turned away, my reflection stayed behind for half a second before following. That night, the vacancy sign flickered on at midnight. Cars arrived quietly. Guests stepped out exhausted and polite, avoiding the mirror without knowing why. I handed out keys. I repeated the rules. I didn't explain the important one unless they asked. And none of them ever did. At 4:59 a.m., the hallway lights flickered. At 5 a.m., they shut off. Someone lingered. I watched the clock tick past checkout. A knock echoed down the hall. Soft, careful. 3 taps. I stayed behind the desk, because I understood now. Checkout ends at sunrise. And I never knock. If you're ever driving late at night and you see a motel that isn't on your map, one with a vacancy sign that only lights up after midnight, keep going. Because some places aren't meant to shelter you forever. They're only meant to slow what's already following. And if you do stop, remember the rule. Checkout ends at sunrise. And never knock. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories for more night shift horror, rules-based tales, and stories best listened to with the lights low. And let me know in the comments, would you stay the night or keep driving? Thanks for listening. I'll see you at the next stop, if you make it there before morning.